Welcome to the second Etain webinar, a series that illustrates the effects of being exposed to radio frequency electromagnetic fields. The second chapter is dedicated to understanding how can we tackle exposure. But what do we mean by exposure? You may be wondering, how can we somehow make visible this invisible network of signals, devices and interactions that we somehow only kind of suspect? Etain is currently working on 3 different tools to help humans understand how to live surrounded by electromagnetic fields.
Hi, Giovanni.
Hey, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm very good.
Should we sit here?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
So, how's life?
Life's good. So I can see the radio frequency electromagnetic fields. How do I know my exposure?
Well, science has shown that exposure to radio frequency electromagnetic fields for the large extent depends on our own actions and behaviors. So for example, if you answer your phone call with the phone on your ear or with your speakers, if you use Bluetooth devices or not, Wi-Fi or mobile data, that actually makes a difference. What's the issue here is to capture the complexity of this phenomenon that's invisible, and it's really hard to capture if you don't have the proper tools.
Does heavy cell phone use hurt human health? Lindsay Davis reports on a major new study which for the first time shows cell phones do seem to have some mysterious effect on the brain.
After 50 minutes, the researchers took PET scans of the subjects. Look at what they found. The image on the left shows what happened when the cell phone was turned on. Notice the upper right part of the brain. That's the area closest to the antenna. Compare that with this image on the right of the same subject when they had their cell phones turned off. The researchers were hoping to determine if the radiation from the cell phones had any physiological impact at all. For years, studies have tried to link cell phones and cancer, but they've been inconclusive.
And once again, the results were inconclusive. So we still don't know of any direct link between the two.
Can all this cell phone use be hurting us?
No, but it represents a concern.
This medical physicist says the concern is radiation.
The regulatory level that the government allows is so low that if I radiate your brain constantly with that amount, the temperature of your brain will increase by 2 degrees Fahrenheit. 2 degrees Fahrenheit is a very mild headache.
Caused by radiation from radio frequency or RF waves coming from this cell tower.
My name is Hamid Jalilian, and I'm an occupational environmental health researcher in Swiss Tropical and Public Health Institute, and I'm a scientific collaborator in Etain project. So radiofrequency electromagnetic field is a type of non-ionizing radiation that is crucial part of modern living, and we need it for telecommunication. The most important sources are mobile phones with the highest contribution of exposure. And then we have BTS, that's the mobile antenna. We have towers that emitted and broadcasting TV and radio frequencies. And also we have microwave at home, and we have MRI in hospital. So somehow we have this exposure everywhere.
Have you ever wondered how electromagnetic fields affect your life? How strong the fields are at your home or outside?
The first Etain tool is a mobile application that offers you the opportunity to learn and estimate the exposure to radio frequency electromagnetic fields around you.
So imagine you go outside on the street maybe you go towards a crowded place like a train station, then you see all around you there are mobile phone antennas on the roofs. So if you are wondering how strong the signal is that gets to you or you are exposed to, you can take out your phone, open the Etain app, and it will tell you how high the values are. Then you can move around, maybe go inside and see whether they get lower or higher. Maybe compare it also to the strength of Wi-Fi. And this, the Etain app will update this data in real time for you. I am Marco Zahner. I am electrical engineer and expert in electromagnetic fields. Etain app turns your smartphone into a measurement device and makes electromagnetic fields visible to you, which otherwise you cannot see, you cannot feel.
Hi Elsa, how are you doing? I'm good, thanks. Yeah, well,
So these new modern mobile network technologies, we have many questions about the actual exposure that they generate, and because they are so complex, we need a lot of measurements from many different users. We need maybe millions of measurements in specific cities to be able to map these exposures.
So you guys have developed a tool that will help me know what's my own exposure, but how is that helping science?
Well, the contribution to science comes from a collective effort of users using the mobile application. So think about each mobile user of the application will generate data and measurement about exposure. What Etain will do is to integrate all this data and create exposure maps across European cities.
Hi, my name is Lloyd Roga. I work for Utrecht University at the Institute for Risk Assessment Sciences. I'm a geodata engineer or GIS specialist, and for the Etain project, I am concerned with mapping EMF exposure data that we collect with the EMF Monitor app. As a mobile phone user, you are exposed to both exposure from your mobile device, but also from the antennas that your mobile phone is connected to. And that second part, we call that ambient or environmental exposure. And this is what you will see on the exposure maps. So you will be able to see at your specific location how much environmental EMF exposures you are exposed to. So no, we do not just aggregate the results from the measurements that we gather from the EMF Monitor app. We actually in the background do a lot of other measurements and calculations. So for example, we use EMF dedicated measuring devices, and we use those measurements we do with that to calibrate the data that we gather from the Etain app. And this is actually quite complex because it depends on a lot of different factors, like the country you're in, or the network provider you're using, or the frequency band, and other environmental factors. And also we do data usage scenarios. So for example, we measure how much exposure is generated when you're using your mobile phone to call or when to stream video, and we incorporate all of this into the calculations to be able to map your exposure.
Okay, so you're telling me that with the app I will get to know my own exposure, and at the same time I will be helping science because we will collectively with other users using the app create an exposure map. But here's my question, how do I know my daily dose of exposure?
Well, here comes the third tool developed by Etain, which is actually called the dose calculator. So the dose calculator is an online web application where you can enter your inputs based on your daily habits, and it will calculate your daily dose to your brain and to your whole body. What is the dose? It's the quantity of radio frequency electromagnetic fields that your body or your brain absorbs from your own exposure. So the dose calculator in summary will allow you to assess and to understand what's your exposure on a normal day, and also give you suggestions or recommendations on how to decrease your own exposure.
So one of the really nice aspects of our dose calculator is that you can use it at different points in time. And that way you can compare your dose from one point in time to another and see whether any changes in your usage of radio frequency devices has maybe changed your dose. Maybe it has increased, maybe it has decreased over time. And that way you can see whether your dose is going up over time or is going down. I'm Arno Thielens. I'm a physicist and an engineer. One of the topics that I study is exposure of humans and other organisms to radio frequency electromagnetic fields. And very particularly in this domain, I am doing dosimetry. And dosimetry is the branch of this field in which we are trying to quantify how much humans and other organisms absorb radio frequency electromagnetic fields. So in radio frequency electromagnetic field dosimetry, there are three important concepts. The first concept is exposure. These are the fields that are emitted by a radio frequency source and are incident upon a certain human. Part of these fields will penetrate a human's body and part of these fields will be reflected. The fields that go inside of a human body can be absorbed inside of your body, and this is something that we quantify using absorption metrics. This can be specific absorption rate, absorbed power density, and potentially other quantities that someone might think of. Then dose is looking at absorption, but averaging it or integrating it over time. So instead of just looking at an instantaneous moment in time and looking how much am I absorbed right now, what we try to do is look at how this absorption changes over time. And this is what we're trying to capture in radio frequency electromagnetic field dose. The second ingredient is how much power is absorbed inside of your body when you are using a certain device or when you are in a certain exposure scenario. The power that is absorbed inside of your body depends a lot on where you are holding, for example, your phone with relation to your body. If you hold your phone really close to your body will absorb a relatively high amount of the power that is emitted by your phone. While if you keep your device further away from your body, you might have a lower absorbed power for the same type of usage or for the same duration of use. Like this, for example, if you call like this, or if you call like this. So here the source is a lot further from your body than it is here, and so here it is easier for power to be absorbed inside your head than when it is here. So as an example, your dosage will be different if you're calling for 1 minute using your phone or if you're calling for 60 minutes using your phone, because a longer exposure leads to a higher dose. So the third important aspect that we take into account in the dose calculator is the intensity of the exposure that you're experiencing in a certain scenario. So when you're making the same phone call, for example, with bad connection or good connection on your phone, this might lead to a completely different output power of your phone. And this in turn then might also increase or decrease your dose. If you want to help us in our project, or if you're interested in your own personal dose, then download our app or visit our website and start using the dose calculator.
So what is it? It's a questionnaire at the end of the day. It's a web application, so you can access it from the website but also from the app. So you have the dose calculator. So what is it? It's a web page which basically includes a questionnaire that asks you about your habits with different technologies, and at the end it gives you information about your daily exposure. So the level of absorption of radiation from your own use of technology. So what you have is, you start, for example, with mobile phones. So it asks you how many minutes approximately of calls you do every day. When you do a phone call, how much time you use it with the phone against your ear and how much time you use it with your headphones and so on. And asks you different questions, right? Same for data usage, same for other devices. So that's what you see, right, as a result. So you see in green, you see your own exposure, which is compared to the one that is in purple, that is the average exposure of European citizens. And at the bottom, what you see is a graphical representation of the sources that contribute to your own exposure.
So the dose calculator will let me know what is my daily exposure when it comes to radio frequency electromagnetic fields, and will give me also some hints. But what I'm wondering here is, how can I know a little bit? What should I do with like my daily exposure, for example, with my phone? Like, is there something that I should know, that I should do? Any recommendation?
Sure, well, there are some common rules, right? So first, you have to consider that the majority of your exposure comes from your mobile phone, as this is the device that's mostly attached to your body. So common recommendations are: do not use the phone on your ear, try and take phone calls, use your headphones or the speakers. And there's one that's hard to believe, but actually if you make phone calls with a very bad coverage, your exposure is much higher. Here, for example, I have quite good coverage, so it's good to make a phone call here. So avoid making phone calls when the coverage is not good. In those situations, what happens is that the phone will emit a lot of output power, and that output power will contribute to a higher exposure. So do not make phone calls when you're in basements, trains, elevators, basements where the coverage is low. You can always keep an eye on the coverage. You can keep an eye on the mobile app that will tell you pretty much in real time what's a good situation or a bad situation to do something like make a call, navigate the internet, or use the mobile phone in general. So what's going to happen next, right? So from the Etain project, from the application, we're collecting all this data from users, and collectively what we'll do is generate what we call exposure maps. So from all the different signals and data, we'll be able to map the signals of exposure and develop maps that tells you about the level of radiation across European cities.
Now we know a bit more about exposure and about some tools that can help us understand it. It is now time for us citizens to use it and contribute actively to science. Keep posted and watch our following videos. The next chapter will be dedicated to insect pollinators and how do they get affected by RF-EMF. Thanks for watching and see you soon.